Ohio is the 8th largest corn-producing state. The lack of rain and 100-degree temperatures have cut corn yield an estimated 29% for 2012.
This drought caught us all kind of unawares.
A drought really affects your bottom line, and it also affects you emotionally.
In my mind, I didn't know how serious it was going to get.
All parts of Ohio saw some form of drought, from abnormally dry to extreme. This year's corn production is projected to be the lowest since 2006 nationwide, and it's pushing corn prices to record highs.
Mother Nature has a way of always fooling you. We thought we had a beautiful spring coming in this year, and we did. It was a nice, dry, warm spring.
But once the 1st of July hit, and then the second week of July, and it still wasn't responding, and those showers that you thought you might get didn't happen. And then by the end of July, there was no doubt. All you had to do was look around and listen, and you knew it was not going to be good.
All crops are susceptible to drought. The problem with corn is it's very susceptible in the early stage. Corn really needs ample rainfall up through July and August. But it's a very early season crop. It determines a lot of its ear size and bushels in the first 45 to 60 days of its life.
The overall state of crop farmers in Ohio isn't actually going to be that bad, at least not by the end of the year. While some clearly have had a better year than others, the good thing is that over the past 5 years, overall, they've been very good years, and the farmers have been able to build up their balance sheets. They're coming into this drought with relatively strong balance sheets, a lot of reserves, so even those that are losing a lot of money this year. There are a few pockets in the state of Ohio that have had actually about 3 droughts over the past 5 years. Those guys, it's much more tenuous.
We planted around 1,600 acres of corn this year. On a good average year, we'll get around 150 bushel per acre. This year, we're probably looking in that mid-50s to maybe 60 range. We'll have some good corn. We probably will have a field that does 100, but we'll probably also have a field that probably does in the teens. We do have crop insurance. It is a wonderful tool that we use to help sustain our farm and keep it going through tough years like this. Crop insurance doesn't cover you fully. Most people have a 75 or 80% guarantee if they purchase into crop insurance. So for easy figuring, if you had a 100 bushel average on your corn, they would guarantee 80 bushel on your corn crop. You do have to weather part of the loss that you had that year, which is a good thing. We shouldn't be fully insured. We ought to have some reserves back for years like this and be able to weather through them. There might not be any expenditures that we do this year. We might not replace that piece of equipment that needs it. We might not be interested or as interested in any large purchases. We might not be able to look at any land, and we might have to cut back our family wages also. Elevated corn prices do help, but with the short amount of bushels that we have, the crop price has not gone up near enough to offset that. Most farmers like ourselves are in this for the long haul, and we will have our up years and our downs, and you just have to weather through them and know that there's brighter days to come.
Dairy farmers are having a much rougher go of 2012. Dairy farmers over the past couple years haven't had great margins. They've had weak prices. Input costs, grain costs have still been relatively high, really, for the last 5 years. So they haven't really built up much profit, much cushion there. And then this year, the drought-induced really high feed costs, relatively moderate milk prices, it's crushing right now. It's really dairy that are the worst off and that are having the worst go and are bearing the brunt of the drought.
On a daily basis, there'll be about 140 to 150 cows milked here, and we'll send out of here about 15 to 17,000 pounds every 2 days. And it's pretty much the same year-round. On this particular farm, the diet is pretty constant. It's called a total mix ration. That mix for us will be about 35 pounds of corn silage per day, about 20 pounds of a good quality alfalfa hay per day, and about 22 to 24 pounds of a 20% grain mix concentrate. Corn is very critical. It's the most economical thing that we can put in a ration. Price is very critical to us. And just for a little bit of insight, 4 months ago, my tonnage was costing me just a scratch over $300 a ton. Last week, it's pushing $500 a ton. Now you gotta remember, that's about 40% of my cost. And when you get up to $5 a day per cow, and your return is about $11 a day per cow, you just haven't got a prayer. The cows are producing enough, and we're trying to, as they say, make do with what's available, and the companies are trying to help us, but they're in business for a profit too. And it's a struggle, it's a struggle. You'll take the available income you have and do as well as you can to budget it where it needs to go to. You'll stay away from things that you can put off for a later time. Then after you do those things and you're still a minus, which many are today, then you need to look and see, is there something I can liquidate? Can I sell a piece of ground? Can I sell a piece of equipment? Can I sell something that will bring me in cash so that I can cash flow month to month? We're all month to month. Then you look at your own personal wealth and you look and see how much equity do I have in my business. Then you need to go to your banker and say, it's going to cost me $5,000 to $8,000 or $10,000 to cash flow and go through. Can you loan me X number of dollars to cash flow my operation? And that's what a lot of people are having to do. And the challenge there is, can you pay it back? I've got a lot of choices. And one of the very fortunate things about me that a lot of farmers are not willing to do, they're not willing to make some of those choices. Cows will be sent to the butcher more frequently and in greater numbers. I'll be saving the most efficient cows. I'll be looking at those costs that will be the greatest cost, and it has to do with feed. I've already made a few changes. I'm going to make a few more changes. I'm going to evaluate my position, and I'll be all right. I'll be just fine.
When we look at pork, pork's been particularly difficult, and probably behind dairy, it is the next worst corner of agriculture. Very high prices for the feed, not really high meat costs, so a lot of compression there in their profit margins and big losses being racked up.
My primary role is to breed and birth baby pigs. We have 650 sows, and they produce 250 to 300 babies a week. They're weaned at 3 to 4 weeks of age. They go to other facilities to be cared for by other people there. So my primary role in life is that process. To support that, we use 150,000 bushels of corn, about 10 bushels of corn per pig from birth to market. My farmland supports about half of that. The rest I have to buy from the local farmers. What I do is typically, in a typical year, is I buy it from the local elevator. You get into a short year like right now, the question becomes, well, will the local elevator have access to it? So we're getting into a very tight situation there. So right now I'm buying corn that I can find and getting my name on it so that my livestock will have feed to eat. Of course, you pay through the nose to do that, and that becomes the rub. All livestock producers are fighting over those same bushels, and eventually somebody runs out of money, and the industry loses a lot of producers in a drought. I've been able to find feed, so far. I've been able to afford it. We're more concerned kind of going forward that it gets worse. We're 14 months away from the possibility of the feed situation getting better. If next year's crop comes up short like this one, then where are we at? To stay in, you're betting the farm, literally, that things are going to get better. If they get worse, now what do? So this drought's been the most pressing time I've had to look at my business and say, what do I consider getting rid of the breeding stock? I mean, the breeding stock is the engine that drives my finances. If you get rid of that, you just got rid of your business. So that's a big decision. You don't make that one very often, and it's the last one you make.
Assuming a farmer survives the drought, the biggest long-term effect on the farmer is it creates kind of a shock to his system. It means that for the next decade, 15 years, many, many more decisions will be influenced by what if I'd made this decision in 2012. So the biggest thing is in the psyche. That's where the changes occur.
It's kind of tough to look out across tough crops. When you look at your lifespan, if you start farming at the age of 20, by the age of 70, you're probably looking at retirement or hoping to retire. So you only get 50 years to try this, and I just lost one of them.
I think the critical thing is to learn that it will pass, the better will survive, the ill-prepared or the bad lucks, they are going to suffer immensely. I personally don't think it's going to look any better for at least 10 months.
In my personal scenario, I am planning to sell the breeding stock because I'm entering into a new economic relationship with another company. They're going to supply me with baby pigs, so I won't have to breed and birth them myself. The general producer, he's got to decide, does he stay in, does he get out? Each person decides whether it's an all or nothing decision, or is it a percent of the herd. I'm describing for you a world that's full of uncertainty right now, and that's what we're looking at. Normally we can count on corn, normally we can count on the earth growing a crop. This year we've been hit with a ringer where it really hasn't come through for us. So it kind of puts everybody in a hard bind.
Agriculture is a big part of Ohio's economy, so anytime you have a drought, it's going to have negative impacts. Where we're going to see that in the broader economy is really in the day-to-day economic activity of smaller towns, communities whose economy is more influenced by the fortunes of their local agricultural producers. Those producers have sustained losses, whether on their crops, whether in their livestock, and it means that there's going to be less money to spend. The real question is going to be in dairies, and especially the larger dairies. Smaller dairies, they have some dairy cows, but they also tend to have some corn ground, some soybean ground. And so the nice thing is that does offset it a little bit. They're feeding corn that they've grown to their animals. The two of those are going to balance each other out. Same with smaller hog producers. But when we start looking at larger operations, larger dairies especially, the profit margins are just brutal. So that's where I'd really worry. They're going to bear the real brunt of the drought of 2012.